It's an astounding experience, but I had just moved here from California. I have to be honest with you here. And I saw that those columns are not exactly running true, straight. And so I saw them with a little crookedness, and I was thinking of earthquakes, and I thought, where is the nearest exit? So that was a true thought. But as I sat there, I just thought, this is an astounding building, and such a beautiful tribute to the men and women who were immigrants and built that with pennies and nickels and sacrifice.
This place of great beauty, this church, didn't just happen, and it was against the conventional wisdom of its day. And I think it's one of the few places in the entire city of Chicago, certainly the only sacred space, where students can feel a link to the past. The pews are original. They were built at the time the church was under construction. Father Damon had a good deal on lumber, and so he employed parishioners to build the church.
Holy Family Church, as fine churches go nowadays, exteriorly is not the most decorated among Chicago's places of worship. However, interiorly, conditions are different.
It's one of the churches that still has all the, it hasn't, what they didn't do, one of the great things they didn't do after Vatican Council is modernize it. So, no pastor came in there and butchered it and tore out all the altars and tore out the communion rail and put some nice chairs in there and tried to turn it to make it look like somebody's living room.
Upon entry, one will be pleased by the graceful lines and arches of the Gothic architecture.
One of the most beautiful churches in all of Chicago, filled with artwork and statues and stained glass windows that spoke to the people. This, to me, is incredibly uplifting.
The main altar is in Gothic style and in every way corresponds to the architecture of the church. The height of the altar from the floor of the sanctuary is 52 feet. The main altar picture of the Holy Family is a fine copy of Murillo's masterpiece and is said to have been painted by a Jesuit brother in Belgium. The carvings on the magnificent altar, as well as in the sanctuary and upon the altar rail, are exceptional. The most notable of these works is a reproduction of Da Vinci's Last Supper, a beautiful work carved by hand and extending the full length of the altar. The carvings on the altar are the work of Anthony Boucher, who also carved several other statues found around the church. It was a wonderful circumstance that Father Damon should, by accident, fall in with several men skilled in the art of wood carving.
And Anthony Boucher, who the story goes, and it's a wonderful story, was carving cigar store Indians, and Father Damon persuaded him to use his talents for the church.
I'm most attracted to the statue of St. Patrick. He is the only statue that's completely surrounded in gold, gilded somehow, which I think is a symbol of the early life of that parish. If it were founded by the Irish, they have that sentiment deeper than they do the Society of Jesus.
The confessionals are of considerable note. They are made of butternut wood and artistically carved by Anthony Boucher. The pews in the church were installed in 1860 and are still in use. They were considered large and commodious at the time of installation.
One of my favorite things in Holy Family is the side altar on the right-hand side, and Sebastian Boucher has carved St. Joseph and Mary and Jesus on the flight into Egypt, and St. Joseph is wearing a derby hat, which would have resonated with the Irish immigrant laborers in the parish. One of the things that you see in Holy Family Church is the way in which Father Damon got German craftsmen to come and devote their talents to Holy Family Church. The communion rail was crafted by a German Lutheran, so you can't get more ecumenical than that for the 19th century.
The communion railing is considered to be a masterpiece. This beautiful piece of work was carved by Louis E. Wisner in his own house. Whilst the work was in progress, Father Damon visited Mr. Wisner daily. The railing is divided into 17 panels. In panel number 1, we find the carving here to represent a harp, a book, and a cross. In panel number 2, we see a cross and a ladder. Number 3 shows rays in the center background, a cross, and the letters IHS. Panel number 4 is the east gate in front of St. Joseph's altar, on which is carved the cross with a serpent wound around it. Panel number 5 contains a large sheaf of wheat. There's a band around the wheat and a reaping hook is thrust under the band. Resting on the sheaf are 2 large clusters of grapes. Panel number 6 shows a cross, a scourge, and a crown of thorns. Unfortunately, the crown of thorns has broken. Panel number 7 is a radiated center with a chalice surrounded with a column of clouds of glory. Number 8, the papal triple cross, tiara, mitre, ribbons. Panel number 9 constitutes the east half of the middle gate and contains rays in the background with a lamb resting on an altar and a cross passing between the right leg and right shoulder of the lamb. The west half of the gate shows rays in the background and the boy Christ lying on his side on the cross. Panel number 10 is identical with number 5, the sheaf of wheat. Number 11, we see rays in the center with a large-sized pelican whose wings are open and 3 young pelicans. Panel number 12 is the Veil of Veronica. Christ's head is shown in relief. We also see the instruments of the Passion: spear, lance, cross, crown, scourge, pincers, and a hammer. This panel is considered to have the most wonderful carving of all 17. Panel number 13 is a repeat of panel number 6, the cross, scourge, and crown of thorns. Here we see in this panel the crown of thorns is still intact. Panel number 14 is the gate before the altar of the Blessed Virgin. This has a cross, crown of thorns, and a dove with an olive leaf in its bill. Number 15, we see rays in the center with the Immaculate Heart of Mary in relief. Number 16 shows rays in the center with a closed book that represents the 7 sacraments. On top of the book is a lamb. The last and final panel, number 17, shows rays in the center, a cross and an anchor, and the Immaculate Heart of Mary raised in the center.
If you stand facing the sanctuary, and if you look way up, you'll see 2 altar boys holding candles. And that's to commemorate an event that happened. One night, in the middle of the night, while Father Damon was sleeping, somehow these 2 young boys appeared to him, and they didn't say anything, but somehow Father Damon got out of bed and followed them. And they took him to this one house where this woman was dying. So Father Damon gave this woman the last rites, and then these kids just kind of disappeared. And these were 2 kids who had drowned in the Chicago River. This woman was their mother who was dying. These 2 kids were altar boys in the parish. So to commemorate that event, that's what those 2 statues of altar boys are doing way up on each side of the sanctuary in Holy Family.
I think that this was our first project in this city. The school and this church, they were the 2. We always began our work in cities with those 2 institutions, just as it is here today. And if you go to any city in the world, you will always see the church and the school, because the vision and the blueprint that the Jesuits had was that you not only have to have a great school to advance the intellect, but you had to have this church that would nourish and help the soul.
Father Damon specified that the stained glass windows, the clerestory wheel windows in the church from 1859, had to be of the same quality as those in the Protestant Episcopal Church. So he was going first class, but it was a way, I think, to put Catholics on an equal footing with their Protestant and Jewish neighbors.
Well, yeah, maybe talk about a little bit about the windows in the parish, in the church. Supposedly those are quite interesting because, and I'm not an art historian or expert in stained glass, but if you look at them, in most parishes, you know, when they show clerics in their black cassocks, they kind of cheat a little bit. The cassocks are not black, they're sort of like a dark purple. And that, of course, is so that the light will come in and you can see them, because black does not admit light. But somehow there's special glass in these stained windows that the cassocks actually are black. And somehow the glass is made in such a way that they will allow some light through. So yet, you know, the cassocks look black, but still, you know, it's not just like a black blob that where no light is coming through. There's still some light coming through.
The windows that we see in Holy Family were installed in 1907. The 8 principal windows along the nave of the church present scenes from the lives of the Jesuit saints. The workmanship of all these windows is entirely original. The Professing of Solemn Vows by the first Jesuits in 1534. This window represents the beginning of the Society of Jesus, when St. Ignatius and his companions, during a Mass said by Father Faber, bound themselves by vow to undertake the great work planned by St. Ignatius. The death of St. Francis Xavier. As soon as they professed their vows, Ignatius sent his college friend Francis Xavier to India. They never saw one another again, but kept in touch by letters. Xavier died in 1552 on a remote island in the Orient, accompanied by no one but his Japanese servant. Because of his extensive travels and preaching, he is revered as the patron saint of missions. The third window is a double panel, one of which shows St. Alphonsus in prayer, and the other the effect of that prayer, the baptism of an African slave by St. Peter Claver, whose heroic work among the neglected African slaves had been foretold by St. Alphonsus. He encouraged the young priest to devote himself to this life of sacrifice, and the amazing harvest of souls reaped by Father Claver is the best witness of his sanctity. This fourth window shows the Jesuit missionary typified by Father Faber in one of his missionary tours. Alone, on foot, with modesty and holiness of countenance, he is accompanied by angels. Behold, I will send my angel, who will go before thee and keep thee in thy journey. This Frenchman was one of the original Jesuits, the only priest among the 9. His untiring work throughout Europe during the Reformation consisted of preaching the gospel to many Catholics in Germany, Spain, Portugal, and Italy.
Probably one of my favorite things in there is probably, may sound a bit odd, but it's one of the stained glass windows. and it's of Blessed Peter Faber. And it's towards the front of the church, that is towards the Roosevelt side, and it's an image of him approaching a town. And behind him are all these angels. And he had a great devotion to the angels. But in the belief of that time, they always believed every town had a guardian angel. And so he often prayed to the angels with a difficult mission ahead. He prayed to them that they would go ahead and render a good result to the mission, to difficult people. And so I think of that a lot in my own work of, trusting that God is in the details of this. It's not so much about me or what I do, but I think it's a great lesson in that we probably need to develop a little bit more and to think about that God is sending his angels before us to help us.
Saint Aloysius Gonzaga. Coming from a wealthy and influential Italian family, Aloysius attended sick and unfortunate plague victims. While helping the victims, he contracted the plague and died at age 23. Here we see him gathering youths around the shrine of Our Lady. The scene is laid in the garden of a Jesuit scholasticate, or house of studies. In the background is the building wherein he spent his days as a Jesuit student. It is separated by a wall from the court where the saint, kneeling at the side of the altar, is directing 3 boys, who are placing flowers on the altar of the Virgin. Saint Stanislaus Kostka. This Polish teenager entered the Jesuits at age 17 and died only 1 year later while still a novice. Against the wishes of his father and brother, he was determined to make the journey on foot from Vienna to Augsburg and then onto the Jesuit novitiate in Rome. While on the way to Rome and boarding with his brother in the house of a Lutheran family, he was suddenly taken sick. His brother, who was imbued with Lutheran ideas, locked Stanislaus in a room, thereby to deprive him of the consolation of the communion sacrament. God, knowing his ardent longing to receive Holy Communion, sent Saint Barbara to gratify his desire by a miraculous reception of the sacrament. St. John Berchmans and Francis Borgia are the subjects of this next window. Inspired by Gonzaga, Berchmans joined the Jesuits at 18 and walked from his home in Belgium to Rome. He desired to learn many languages and travel to China, but he died only 4 years later. On the right is shown Francis Borgia, who came from a famous and influential Spanish family. After raising 8 children of his own, he joined the Jesuits at age 38 and then became its 3rd superior general. Under his fine leadership, missions were started in North and South America. He is pictured here kneeling in prayer before the Blessed Sacrament, from which rays of light stream upon his face. St. John Francis Regis and St. Francis Jerome. Regis was a true servant to the people of his native France. He consoled the disturbed of heart, visited prisons, collected clothing and food for the poor, and established homes for prostitutes so that they might be rehabilitated. His influence reached all classes and brought about a lasting spiritual revival throughout France. Francis Jerome entered the Jesuits already an ordained priest of 10 years and was sent into the streets of Naples, Italy. He would preach in the streets of Naples and visit the slaves who were chained there. These 2 missioners evangelized during the 17th century.
Church, the love of Jesus that pervades everything. That also attracts me. It's a large stained glass window on the west transept. And it shows the devotion that Margaret Mary Alacoque had for Jesus in her own private prayer. She's praying the rosary, she's sitting there with great devotion, and the Lord appears to her with his heart burning with love, not just for her, but for the church.
The organ was originally built in the year 1869 by Mitchell & Sons of Montreal, Canada, at a cost of $30,000. The pipes are arranged and placed in 3 towers. Over each tower is placed a group of angels, each angel bearing a musical instrument, and is heavily gilded. The organ, as originally constructed, contained 64 registers and 3,944 pipes. It required 6 men on ordinary occasions and 8 men on special occasions to supply wind for this huge instrument. To do away with the old-fashioned hand blowing, 3 powerful hydraulic pumps were installed to supply the wind in 1892. These pumps worked very well for a number of years until the city water pressure became too low to operate the motors. The original Mitchell & Sons organ case has remained untouched since 1869, but in 2006, the Hooper Foundation and the Rice Foundation donated new pipes saved from St. Maria Church in Helsingør, Denmark.
My dad, the Hooper Foundation, donated the Frobenius and the Steinbrenner, the 2 organs in Holy Family Church. The Steinbrenner is the big one up top, with the angels and the gold, and my dad brought it over with his foundation, and he donated it to the church, and there was a huge ceremony, and Cardinal George came and blessed it, and it was quite a big deal for my family.
They built this extraordinary church as a gift and legacy for everyone that would follow, for their children and grandchildren. They didn't build that with the idea this might be torn down in 100 years. They built that with the idea this is here forever.
New Family, it elevates the mind and the spirit, because the way the church is built along traditional lines, it turns your gaze upward. It's not horizontal, it's vertical.
There's a little boy who was probably 4 or 5 years old. And he came in, it was his first time there, and he put his finger into the holy water and made the sign of the cross. But as he did that, he looked up. Funny day, this boy's eyes just opened wide, and he screamed, "Wow!" And I think that's what Father Damon and the people that built that and funded it wanted.
"Have you seen Father Damon?" And I'm like, "No, I haven't seen him." She says, "Of course you have. He's about 6 feet tall, and he walks up and down Roosevelt Road."
It's our spiritual home.
Important that you have a church that looks like a church, that takes you out of your everyday existence.